at your convenience.
I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Oconee County Planning Commission. This is Monday, July 17th, 6 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation. Would you please, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Everybody please pray with me if you will. Heavenly Father, we ask that you please watch over this committee and the planning staff and guide us to wise and safety-conscious decisions in support of the public. We also ask that you watch over county law enforcement, first responders, and other county workers as they perform their duties, that they may return home safely to their families after every shift. And we ask that you please watch over the county and state leaders as they work to make the county and state a better place to live each day. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, y'all have before you the minutes of our meeting way back in June. Hear any corrections? Motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further comment? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Did you hear me the last meeting? Okay. I didn't see you raise your hand or anything, so
Oh, I was in my own little world over here.
we're approving the minutes.
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. All right, commission member comments. Anyone?
We don't have any public comments. We already asked for public comments.
Not on this,
There were none signed up.
none signed up for this. All right, if nobody wants to say anything, we've got staff comments. I'm sure we have a few comments from
We
staff.
do. So, just for information for y'all, I'll be out of the country starting Friday. I'll be back before your next meeting, so you won't miss any time with me. But I will have limited access to email and phone the next couple weeks. And we do have 4 subdivisions to share with you this evening. First is a new Cliff community. And I'm going to show you this map first of the parcel. So you can get your bearings a little bit. This highlighted piece right here. And it can be better seen here. This is 37 units. It is on about 27 acres, and this is a new proposal. Happy to entertain any questions about it this time.
It looked like it was right next to the clubhouse there.
It's just a continuation of their, they've done, this will be their 4th one they've done in about a year and a piece.
This is one septic field for the 37 houses? Is that what it is?
They are proposing septic fields here at the north. Or 37, yes.
It's maybe a stupid question, but explain that to me.
Shared septic field would be like a drainage field and storage tank for all the units to share. Would have to be approved by the state, so the state can give you more details about their engineered system. Second, this is a reapplication with a new plan. This is originally the Pier South had 176 units. Several of those were townhouses. This has been revised to be 162 units, no townhomes, only single family. I'm going to show you the that same area, this portion without the treatment plant. So. Terry, and this parcel right here.
These are all single-family homes.
They are.
They have,
Less than. The next, this is another rehash of one that was originally the junkyard subdivision. It's the same parcel. That will back up to Oak. And the new subdivision that's planned down here as well. This is for 149 units. This is an additional 4 units from the previous design, which was for 145 on 42 total acres.
And you said it was a redesign?
It is, so it's a new developer, but it's the same, it's similar to what they've done with the pier. So we've got, slight changes to the layout, they've squeezed in a few more.
And are they bringing sewer up through Seneca?
Haven't seen their sewer plans yet. They will be getting sewer service from somewhere. It will, it will be Seneca Light and Water that operates that system.
Can you go back to the GI, that overlay there?
Yep.
Okay.
Got a little bit too for you.
so this is all that land between, Oak Street and that
Yeah, so they've got
Roundabout.
some of these pieces in here, and then the Oak Street subdivision is
Yeah,
down
okay.
off of Wells, encompasses most of this through here.
And again, these are probably less than a quarter of an acre lots.
They'll have to be. And I got one more for you tonight. This is a project that got a little bit of press earlier. This is around Paw's Diner. It was originally, they've actually got it listed as Green Paw. It's gonna be 162 units, 480 beds, student housing, coming around here. So there's the existing Paw's Diner, and then all of this. Again, happy to answer any questions if anybody has, but I think this time.
Have you seen
How many
this?
stories is that unit, are those units?
So they haven't given us, this is the only plan sheet that they have submitted so far, so we don't have a building profile yet. I'm trying to figure out how they're gonna squeeze that many units into the gray hashed out areas. There is a height restriction in the control-free district of 65 feet, so that would limit it to about 4 stories, maybe 5, depending on kind of what they're doing. So we'll have more information as soon as they submit it.
You have a sewer plan for this?
This is the only plan sheet that they've submitted at this time.
There's no sewer there yet, right?
I don't know the availability of sewer in the area. This is everything that they've submitted. They don't
So
have to
there's
be on
sewer ponds in
before.
there?
I don't think
So
so.
that's right there beside the,
Whatever, they're working out.
where that restaurant on the corner.
Yeah, so that restaurant, Paw's Diner, is this structure.
Yeah, but there's
right here.
another restaurant,
That's the restaurant.
and then you got the one down here at Davis.
Bojangles?
Bojangles, that's what I was trying, I couldn't remember which one it
Yeah,
was.
That's
but-
over here.
Yeah, but I mean, that's still all of that.
That's it. Thank you.
Did they sewer water overlay?
No. The we don't own or operate sewer or water and do not have access to all of their records.
Question?
Yes,
How long ago?
several times.
So, yeah.
We haven't gotten them.
No.
Can we request them again with emphasis on we
So-
want them?
The latest that we have is what Chris gave to everybody before his presentation, which was, I can resend everybody again. We know it's not a full, complete picture because there are several sewer operators, that ultimately send treatment to the OJRSA, but we don't have a complete picture of what is and isn't available, especially within the municipalities. Excuse me.
So once we get that update, we'll be able to overlay it on these maps.
Potentially, I mean, we can, it won't be perfect, but.
Yes.
Or correct?
Capabilities.
Do we have the ability to get those maps from the municipalities themselves?
We have requested them, we can.
Okay.
Anything else on these, or y'all already,
Thank you.
absolutely?
Can I ask a question about that one down on Oak Street?
Sure.
Is there any proposal for like change of the roads or?
So there's, the Oak Street subdivision is still working with the DOT on their encroachment permit, and their traffic impact study will determine whether or not any improvements are required. But ultimately, the DOT will make that decision on whether or not to implement any changes to the road.
Okay. So that'll all be in further down the road proposals.
It will, well, it'll have to be resolved before they, get their permit to proceed. So they can't make a cut and connect to the state road without that encroachment permit.
Right.
Or they should.
Never say you can't. Right. Okay, thanks.
Yes. That's it for me.
Okay. We'll go into item number 8, discussion of comprehensive plan goals for 2023, chapter 5. Madam, it is your floor.
Okay, chapter 5 deals with, is the cultural element of the comp plan. Looks at historic buildings, museums, art galleries, entertainment events, venues, local art, tourism, and the revitalization of core commercial and residential districts. This is a small, actually it's a small, there's small, very few checkpoints in this chapter for this year. 5211, encourage residents to connect with one another and their communities through a strong awareness of and commitment to local history and historic places, as well as deep something. I couldn't read
Appreciation
that.
for the arts.
Deep appreciation for the arts, oh, thanks. Newry, the Newry store, the Newry General Store has just opened. The Oconee County Chamber of Commerce did a ribbon cutting ceremony for the general store. The store was established in 1893 as part of a cotton mill operation and now is open 7 days a week, 7:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. And go see it. The food there is fabulous, I'm told. Again, for 5211, Seneca is celebrating its 150th anniversary, all kinds of events all year for that. There's a big article in the Lake Living magazine about before there were lakes, and it talks about the Cherokees, the finding of the unearthing, I guess, of the canoes there, and encourage people to go to the Museum of the Cherokee in Walhalla, see that. Foothills Farmstead the July 1, so it was a ground, let's see. They restored an 1870s farmhouse. There was a grand opening July 1 to see it. Foothills Farmstead became an organization in 2017, and a local named Nick Gambrell was headed that up. And they received more than 3 years ago a grant from South Carolina Parks, Rec, and Tourism, which Oconee County matched. The county also sponsored opening day. Visitors are welcome Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays. And he's going to be setting up exhibits to host programs such as field trips for children. Go see that piece of our history. 5212, moving on. Increase the awareness of Oconee County residents of all ages and income levels in visual, performing, and literary arts and cultural programming. We have Music on Main, sponsored by Westminster Music. There's Jazz on the Alley on Thursdays. Eagle Nest Art Center offers music and art, and the Oconee Community Theater has various productions. 5214, enable residents of all ages to acquire knowledge and skills in the arts by supporting art projects that address lifelong learning. The Blue Ridge Art Center is good for this. Their mission is to bring art to people and people to the arts. For example, they did the public murals in Seneca, Ramcat Alley. They made 12 steel cats that were lasered by the Hamilton Career Center welding students. Then they were painted by local artists and put throughout downtown Seneca. And people are encouraged to do a scavenger hunt looking for them. There's that. 5215, promote opportunities for volunteerism and sponsorships of tourism, cultural, and recreational offerings. The U.S. Forest Service spearheads an annual spring sweep cleanup day that happened in March. And there's volunteer opportunities to help scientists study the behavior of the common loon on Lake Jocassee. Didn't know if you knew that. And there were dates in January, February, March, and April. And they needed 12 volunteers to stay for a week at Devil's Fork State Park and study the loons. How about that? Oh, and Upstate Heritage Quilt Trail. It's a nonprofit. It's an all-volunteer organization. There's 29 quilts, I guess, in Walhalla and 35 in Westminster. The Oconee studio is in the old Oakway Intermediate School in Fairplay. Each quilt has a history. There are details about family ancestors and historical references that can't be found anywhere else. 5224, encourage volunteer involvement in cultural programming, organizations, and events by community, faith-based civic groups, as well as businesses. Oconee County, 12 organizations in Oconee County were on track, this was back in May, to receive $60,000 in grants from Parks, Rec, and Tourism Commission to help boost tourism throughout the county. The Walhalla Performing Arts Center got some money. The South Carolina Apple Festival, the Westminster Music Center, the Foothills Ag Resource and Marketing Center, the Oconee Military Museum, the Museum of the Cherokee in South Carolina, the Oconee County Chamber of Commerce, Wild Hearts Equine Therapy Center, and the Eagles Nest Art Center all got grants from the county to keep up with that. And 5324, preserve the culture and identity tied to ag and the landscape of the county's rural communities. The Seneca Faith Cabin Project is significant for its role in African American education and social history in South Carolina. It was constructed in 1937 as one of only 2 remaining freestanding faith cabin libraries in the state and the only remaining building from the Seneca Junior College campus. And this is an ongoing project to rehab this with Clemson, and it's on the National Register Historic site. And that completes chapter 5.
You're on like the call in for the remainder of the meeting. Hey, let me put you on speaker here. There you go.
All right, we will go to discussion regarding the development of an ordinance to foster the identification and safe repair or removal of structures that have become unsafe for occupancy as a result of fire, damage, or natural disaster, or just falling apart because they're old. Mr. Rick, you want to sort of go over this with us, sir?
Yes, sir. I did watch the meeting, Bill's last meeting when it was going on, and I tried to watch it again, but then I couldn't cut the time out. But I do remember the essential questions that you had going through the ordinance. I'll hit those, and then whatever else y'all have, just jump in. So the first, I guess, series of questions dealt with the origin of the ordinance. This came from Law Enforcement, Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee. Mr. Davis wanted an ordinance that was specifically targeted toward buildings that were rendered unfit because of fire. They had a meeting to discuss that in some more detail, and Mr. Mize asked that it also include unfit buildings that are rendered unfit, unsafe because of a natural disaster. So that's the way that the ordinance was drafted, to target those two specific types of causation sources for the types of damage. The International Property Maintenance Code, which you've heard bantied about a lot, covers these issues, but it's just like the building codes. It's not as thick as a building code, but it's incorporated by reference into our codes because we can't publish the whole thing within the codified ordinances. I believe one of Mr. Davis's reasons for doing this was to have something that's spelled out specifically from A to Z for this particular issue. Even though that it may be somewhat redundant with the property maintenance code, this is a specific rifle approach. And I think Mr. Mize is of the same mind why he included the natural disasters. Kind of divining that, but I was at the meeting, so that's where it came from, and that's where they sent it to you. The first draft, of course, went to them, and then they sent it to you. I think a lot of the questions were related to the fact that this came from state law, and why isn't it, why don't we just defer to state law, or, essentially that was the essence of the questions I remember from here. The reason maybe it's good to get it's probably good, just bear with me for a quick history lesson on county powers. So this particular statute that enables this ordinance was in 1962 is when it was put on the books by the General Assembly. At that period of time, we were still operating, counties were under what's called Dillon's Rule. Dillon's Rule, all county local governments were very much curtailed in what they could do. They didn't have plenary or widespread powers to legislate. So they could really only do specifically what the General Assembly said you could do. Oftentimes that was carried out through their legislative delegation. So you always hear about the delegation here. You might think, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot of import now, except for that's our group of legislators. Kind of is the case, although they transmit certainly information and requests to the state. But it used to be prior to Home Rule, which happened in 73 and 75, that legislative delegation and the state really did all the governances for the counties. The statute that enables this ordinance was one of those pre-Home Rule statutes. It doesn't say these are the things. It doesn't list this out as a state ordinance. It says, hey, counties, you can do this if you track with this language. So it's not redundant to the state. The state doesn't have one for this for counties. It's just this county's at your option. If you want to do this, here's the statutory framework. So that's called an enabling ordinance. We call it different things, but it's a springboard onto the actual ordinance. So we're not replicating state law. We're taking the charge or the power from state law that was delineated in 62. So that's why it's kind of odd that they gave this enabling statute ordinance, and we put it into an ordinance for the county. So that's why when we talk about 97, 98% of it's just what's written in the state law. It is that, but it's not copied from what the state's enforcing. The state says, hey, counties or municipalities, if you want to do this, here's the way to do it. Does that make sense? So James, to the extent we need to flash it up, the state law that outlines everything that's on here. And here it is. I mean, you can see there's another section before this, 3115, I think it starts at 10, for municipalities. But James, if you just skip a couple sections, go, I'm sorry, maybe just one section. Go down. go to 330, sorry.
Yeah.
330. So these are provisions permitted to be included in the ordinances. So this is where you'll see this language. This is Westlaw, it's just my search database, but you'll see this language from the state that's mirrored in this ordinance. So that's why it is the way it's drafted. You have the history of what they wanted, what the Law Enforcement Planning, Law Enforcement Public Safety Committee wanted, why this looks the way it did, and it's really, obviously, I'm not gonna take it upon myself to tweak it much and make it any different. A number of, I think, pretty much every major jurisdiction in the state, major county jurisdiction has this on the books because it was effective prior to the International Property Maintenance Code. Some folks still do both. This one can be a little bit easier to wield, I think. The due process provisions are different than the International Property Maintenance Code. I'm not gonna say which one is better. I think perhaps the International Property Maintenance Code just spells things out more specifically. The timeline is pretty tight on this, but it's what the state outlines and apparently has been effective in other jurisdictions for quite some time. So that's where it came from. That's why we have it here. They sent it to you all for comments and input, and so that's why you have it.
Okay, floor is open.
Mr. Varley, can you mute your phone on your end?
I'll try.
All right, thank you.
All right, the floor is open. If y'all have any questions?
I got a question for you, Mr. Reed.
Yes, sir.
So the way this is written, it's primarily gonna affect one group of people, and that's the poor uninsured.
I can't divine that who it will affect more. It may, but I don't know that that's the
Well,
case.
if you have insurance on your home and it's hit by a natural disaster, it's gonna be taken care of.
The reason I balked at that is because of the timeline. There's different insurance
I
agencies that
understand
are
the
more
timeline.
responsive than others.
Yeah, I understand the timeline, but still, even without the timeline, if the timeline is extended out to a reasonable time, which it's not in this ordinance, it's going to be targeted towards one group of people, and that's the poor uninsured. Can we do that? Or are we going into infringing on their personal property rights? That is one thing that separated the United States from a lot of other countries, is us having the ability to own property and to keep it, and the government not seizing it. I'm just curious of what language can we use to ensure that this ordinance is not used as a means to target those individuals?
Can I have a moment, Mikey?
Yes.
You're assuming that all of these people affected are the homeowners. There perhaps could be landlords in this situation, could there not, the way this is written?
Certainly could be that.
Right.
Yeah, the owner is fine. If I could just address that question first. So it's been on the books for 61 years. They haven't identified any due process concerns with it if it was followed the way the state mandated it. So the counties have an extra bit of safeguard when the state says, hey, do it this way, and you do it that way, that, generally you're gonna have a fallback for any due process, equal protection concerns, which is what you're raising there. Could it play out the way it's drafted in the current, it's different than 1960, obviously, in the current climate and the way things are, to have a different impact on folks who can't readily repair their buildings? Yes, absolutely. I think that's a common sense approach to it. Is there a way to take away some of the discretion, I guess is what you're saying, that a public official may have in implementing this that would carve out folks without means? I think it'd be a hard time to do that without creating a classification that would have equal protection problems with it. I'm open for
Can
any
we not
suggestions.
just
I don't have a pride in authorship of this because,
Well,
like
can
I
I-
said, I cut and pasted it for the
Can we
most
just
part.
simply define that all properties that are not listed as primary residence?
So this would just apply to secondary residence.
secondary lanes.
You could
Commercial.
do it that way. I think, again, that creates some equal protection concerns. Obviously, a big part of this is none of us operate in a vacuum. And so the spillover effects from these properties are on the neighbors and the county in general for under its police powers, public safety and health. The neighbors are gonna be impacted, I would assume, to the same degree regardless of who's owning it or if it's a primary, secondary, tertiary residence. So I do have some, I guess, just on a knee-jerk reaction, some equal protection concerns that could rise that way, rise under that circumstance, but as far as passing it back along to law enforcement, public safety, saying, hey, planning commission just wants us to apply to second homes, I'd do that and I'd have that discussion with them. If they aren't concerned about the equal protection concerns and want to go with that, then we'll draft it in that way.
So you have concerns about just making it apply to secondary residents, but not the way it's worded now?
Correct, because it applies to all residences, period. You're not cutting out a classification and then going back on what I said. It's a state statute that enables counties to do it X, Y, Z, and this is X, Y, Z, to the dot and tittle. So once you deviate out of that, do you expose yourself to some potential liability more? Certainly, you go into an unknown area. So that's not to say, hey, that's a bad idea. I'm glad to pass it along and take it that way.
This reminds me of the old saying Reagan used, the most fearful thing you can hear is, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. This sounds like it.
The problem is, you're looking at a condemned property, right?
No,
No?
Could be. And again, that's the flip with the International Property Maintenance Code. With the IPMC, it does go through condemnation. Get that definition straight. There's condemning a property, hey, this is unfit, do not go in here. And then folks will use condemnation for eminent domain takings. We're condemning this, the government's gonna take that property for whatever public purpose. So here we're just talking about condemned, don't go in here because it's unsafe. That can run on a parallel track with this, but this really doesn't provide that same mechanism. The pure condemnation for a structure is more clearly outlined in the International Property Maintenance Code. So, correct.
But if you're, okay, let's say a house is damaged because of the tornado, okay, let's just pick that, we all know about that, right? Are you saying that if there's people living in that house, this is how this is gonna be, or there's people living in it? There's not people living in these houses, are there?
yes.
The structures that folks are living in, and I'm not saying here, is in low countries and mid-state, and it's all over, and it's very sad.
Well, if it's unsafe for human occupation, it's condemned.
Condemnation is an act of law. It's not just automatically condemned, if that's what you're saying.
I understand that goes through a process. Well, isn't that what we're doing here? We're condemning the property?
Okay, so I'm thinking of condemnation in a legal setting. When you say a property is condemned, no one can live in there. Yes, don't go into this process until the due process, don't go into this property until the due process takes its course, and the property can either be fixed or repaired, and it's placarded, it's condemned. So if anyone goes in there, it's trespass. The ultimate result, as it goes through that process, is the property could be demolished, it could be repaired. So that kind of is the de facto result, I think is what you're saying, and I agree. The de facto result is, yeah, it has the same or very similar effect as a condemnation.
But this is to get them to repair, replace, or destroy. Before it goes to the legal action of condemnation.
Well, it's not before, it wouldn't go through that legal act.
It wouldn't?
No, this outlines the due process, which is this public officer, and bear with me because I've not been in a jurisdiction where this has been employed, but going with the black letter. Public officer makes the findings, it's either on his own or her own initiative, or 5 neighbors, as it's written now, as it's written from the state law, does the investigation, puts the owner on notice. They've got, I think, 10 to 30 days, I get my timeline, to have their hearing. An order is going to issue after that hearing. There's no timeline, as I recall, outlined for when the order issues from the public officer. 10 to 30 days for the hearing, after service of this complaint by the public officer. Then after that hearing, from the public officer is going to issue an order, and it could be to the effect of, hey, this property needs to be demolished. So that gets that point, it's really pretty much a condemnation. It's just not called that here. And then the property owner has the opportunity at that point, 60 days, to file a TRO, temporary restraining order, injunctive order, requesting that relief from the circuit court to stop the proceedings.
I have a problem with giving 5 residents the ability to tell whoever that that place is unfit. What if 5 people are mad at you and decide they're gonna get back at you and you're living in a house, your house is unfit to them, so now we have 5 people that don't like you that says your house is unfit. Now we gotta send all the county people out just to check your house out. That's stupid.
So what about just, or whenever it appears to the public officer on his own motion that any dwelling is unfit for human habitation?
That's scary.
I could see that.
That's where that's scary.
I could see that better than 5, you upset 5 of your neighbors and all of a sudden, now you've got to go through this whole process of making sure your house is safe.
Mr. Chair. So from a legal standpoint, going back to how this can actually affect the board, our percentage, they're not going to be able to afford the legal costs involved. So they're not going to have representation the way this is written.
Not, and I don't want to rely on legal services. When I say legal services, I'm talking about South Carolina Legal Services. They provide, there's folks who do, entities that do legal services, usually in the domestic area for indigent folks, criminal area, and then there's legal services who does it in general civil areas. A lot of times it's with landlord-tenant and property issues. So they could get representation that way, but yes, just, I care about the law and how it's applied, and that's the concern I have whenever you see something like this. Okay, well, you do have redress, and they do have redress, but they're gonna have to file a suit after that 60 days if it doesn't go their way. So, that, just like anything, I mean, if you're charged with a crime, anything you go through, better lawyer, more
Well, I
money,
agree
it's
when
gonna
you're
be better.
charged with crime, but this is, I don't see this as a crime. I see this as a person trying to do the best they can with what they
Yeah, I
have.
think you missed my point. I said, if you're charged with a crime, you're generally, if you have funds, you're probably gonna get a better defense, and you're risking your life, liberty, and certainly your property there. So this is, I'm saying, is certainly of a lesser extent, because you're not going to prison, but you are gonna get, if you can afford quality representation, probably your house is not in this state.
But from my standpoint, it can ruin, let's say it's a elderly person, and this is the house they raised their kids in. This is the house that they plan on dying in. This has the potential, when you come in there and rip them out of that house, to end their life due to the stress. That's the problem I see with this whole thing, is that those who can afford it will afford it, and those who cannot and will not, and it will destroy their life. You are giving them a life sentence by passing this ordinance.
Flip a coin. You?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So have we benchmarked neighboring counties like Pickens and Anderson County to see if they have a similar ordinance?
Anderson does, I don't know that Pickens does, I know Greenville does, Sumter does, Richland does, Charleston does, Greenwood. Yeah, I looked at, it's been a bit, because I can't reel them off, but I looked at probably the top 15 jurisdictions whose lawyers I trust, and they do have it. Like I said, these are old, these were on the books. A lot of them put them on the books in the 80s for whatever reason I noted, but prior to the International Property Maintenance Code. But if that's the concern, I mean, if y'all are all of the same mind, hey, this is gonna have a disproportionate impact on on the poor. We don't want that to be the case, and it's an easy recommendation back to law enforcement, just tell them that.
I've got a couple of questions. Are you satisfied with your answers there? So the state has offered some sort of framework that this ordinance is being created around. Two questions. One, the timeline that's outlined here, is that also in the framework at the state, or did we plug in these numbers as our own timeline?
I mean, 97 or 98%, whatever I conveyed to James, may have been generous. It might be 99 point something. The timelines, the wording, it is all out of what the state statute says you can do.
Okay, so the state dictates the 60 days, this happens, and another 30 days to respond and things like that.
The timelines all came out of the state statute, correct?
The other question is that, does the state, in their framework, do they talk about the items that the public officer would view to make the determination this goes to the next step?
Yeah, James, I mean, it's the same as the ordinance, but if you want to pull it up, let's see.
So, because as I understand it, you've got 5 residents that say, hey, there's a problem, this structure is unsound, and then are there certain items that officer then has to look at to make that determination?
If you look at 320 to start, James, which is up, Control Plus, or just blow it up some. So that's where it starts. The nature of the conditions that lead to dangerous, detrimental to the health, safety, morals, otherwise, inimical to the welfare of the county citizens. That will be the touchstone on what you're looking at. Then 330, the following section delineates really, this is, I would say, the gravamen or the essence of the statute, or the statutory framework, goes through how a complaint, the 5 residents versus or by the public officer. Yeah. And then the whole proceeding on how, what the findings need to be, when they need to be. And it probably would be better if you shrunk it up a little bit so we could see the whole thing. That's what sorry.
So continuing along that line, just looking at example 3, if I look at that. So determination under consideration is unfit for habitation. But does it go and break down, okay, there's no sewer, or there's no water, or there's no, or is it just say, in my opinion, that's unfit?
Yeah.
It's in section 5, isn't it? Standards for determining fitness?
Right.
Yeah.
I think the International Property Maintenance Code does it a bit better, but, let's see.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
We're so disgusted.
Wait 1 second. I got one question. It says 5 residents of the county, so if I'm riding around the county and I see something in the other side of Long Creek, I live down in Westminster, I don't live in Long Creek, but I see this, I can get 5 people to get with me and say that's an unfit structure and it has to go through all of this, or does it have to be someone in that neighborhood? In other words, just go back to the mill village in Seneca with all the dilapidated homes.
330, section 2. Yeah. Again, from the state set, 5 residents of the county. And I think the notion, Mr. Pearson, is not that, our complaint system for code enforcement for property maintenance code is generally complaint driven too, and that's usually a person. I think they're trying to put a safeguard in here so you don't have the neighbor with a vendetta. And this doesn't trigger, these 5 people are not the judge and jury of it, but the public officer can act on it once he gets those 5.
They start the process. So if I live in Oakway, 5 residents in Oakway decide they want to ride to the other end of the county, they can complain and say that's an unfit structure. That's not, I don't think that's right, because we already have people riding around sticking their nose in other people's business that should stay at home, that don't live in that area. So can this, if you're gonna do this, can it not be changed? You have to live in that area? I mean, you can't be from Oakway and complain about something in Long Creek. I mean, that's two separate areas. If you got to live in the area of the said problem. In other words, that, I live in Westminster, why should I ride to the Mill Village, Mill Hill, whatever you want to call it, here in Seneca, and start complaining about everything down there? I don't live down there. So it's not affecting me that they have a house that partially burned down. It's affecting the people that live in that area, and 5 of those get together, that's one thing. But why should somebody that lives in the other side of Westminster complain about something they never see to start with, except when they want to ride around the county and be nosy as crap?
I don't know that you could not change that to make it a location specific to the residents. So my only concern with it would be that by doing that, you kind of undercut, all of this is based on the public or police powers, public health and safety powers that counties carry. So, and those are for the county in general. So if you're saying that this derelict structure, unfit structure, whatever, is only gonna impact these people within a mile radius, that kind of undercuts the notion that this, though it may happen, you know, in one part of the county, it's affecting the county in general. That's the notion. But I don't know that there would be any restriction on saying, hey, these 5 residents that live within a particular area. I can't think of a problem apart from the kind of general applicability of police powers.
All right, let's stop right here and let Mr. Markovich speak, if y'all don't mind, and before we go any further, okay? I left it out, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I figured you'd eventually get around to it. Thank you for allowing me to, I can't find my place now. When I saw this, I was like, and I was in Washington for the last meeting, so I missed any of the discussion about that. But it's unquestionable, this is a law that goes back over 75 years, in which we had no building codes at the time, no state building codes. There were a few minor municipal building codes in terms of electrical and plumbing. That was pretty much it. There was no other building codes in this. We had no code enforcement officer, period. We had no standards at all. And so it really came down to, just like the delegation, it came down to the senator and the sheriff. They better be your friends, because if they weren't, it was whatever they decided, period. That was pre-home rule. That was what South Carolina was all about. And if you didn't live through it, you just missed history, I guess. Anyway, since that time, we now have a statewide building code. It has a standard that is applied across all the United States. This thing has no standard, none. It's just whatever this official decides. Oh, that's not right, that's not safe, that's not moral. Give me a break. I mean, who's gonna start being the moral police? I mean, this is just insane. The other thing it does, I'm looking at the one thing that caught my eye immediately, the definition of dwelling. So now we're gonna have, we have in the building codes, we define dwelling. It's a very specific thing. And there are very specific mechanisms that creates it to be a dwelling. Now, you go to the property maintenance code and it spells out what's not a dwelling. It doesn't say exactly what a dwelling is, but it talks about structures that are not dwellings. So now we got a different thing there. Then we've got our Oconee County subdivision ordinance, and it has another definition for dwelling that is not the same as any of these, okay? And now we're gonna have this one. So we'll have 4 different definitions of a dwelling, and every time a conversation comes up, unless everyone specifically says, oh, which dwellings are we talking about? it's just gonna go in circles. This is just purely, I mean, this thing is so outdated. We have so much law and case law, and there's been plenty of old law that has been undone, not undone. Only the legislature can undo a law, but a court can overrule it. And so, and that's what's happened, and that's what would happen to something like this. There is so much law, case law, that would reinforce the new codes, the property maintenance code, the building code, and those procedures. But a poor person, can a poor person go to court? No, never gonna happen. Who's gonna represent them? Who's gonna put up the money? Nobody. So, that's where I see the poor people getting, because somebody like me, would I challenge this? In a heartbeat. Can I afford to? Probably not, but I'd do it anyway, just make the point. And so, but poor people can't afford that. And plus, it doesn't make sense to have all these different mechanisms when we already have other mechanisms that will do the process. We have the property maintenance code. We have the building code. There are a lot of powers within the building code. Maybe the building codes department's not using them. I have no idea. But I'm just saying the powers are there, and the powers are within property maintenance code. This thing is so antiquated because no standards existed back then. I think this thing's outrageous. Thank you. That's all I got.
Now, we're back to where we were before.
Can I make my motion now?
You can do it.
I make a motion that we kill this ordinance.
I'll second that.
And just to go back to my history lesson.
I'll table it, kill it.
This came from law enforcement committee, so I'm going back to the law enforcement committee with whatever your
You
recommendation.
make a recommendation.
If your
and-
recommendation is, hey, guys, kill it, then that's it. Just so you know, it doesn't stop here. I've got to go take it back.
And I'll second that. And then a little quick discussion. This, kind of what Tom Markovich was saying, kind of what you were saying, this paints such a picture of eminent domain and yet makes the owner pay for it. It's such a strange thing. We want to have a park here. We don't like what your property looks like. We want you to change it and you're going to pay for it. It just doesn't seem right.
So I want to jump in on there, because there is a demarcation in the law for that scenario that is different. So here, they're addressing, through the process, buildings that are unfit. A condemnation action, just, to take somebody's property to use it for something else is a completely different
But
animal. It's not going to be used for a park or.
But I've not been able to find in here where the unfit is definable down to where I think it would need to be definable to.
Yeah, I think Mr. Markovich brings up a good point, Mr. Haney brought up. I think all of y'all have touched on the same thing. The Spicer noted the 350 section, and that's as good as you get for a definition, which are dangerous or injurious to the, to the health, safety, and morals of occupants of such dwelling, the occupants of neighboring dwellings, or other residents in the county. Such conditions may include the following without limiting the generality of the foregoing: defects therein increasing the hazards of fire, accidents or other calamities, lack of adequate ventilation, light or sanitary facilities, dilapidation, disrepair, structural defects, uncleanliness. So that's the guidance. The ordinance may provide additional standards to guide the public officer or his agents in determining the fitness of a dwelling for human habitation. Again, I would say the property maintenance code does a much better job of outlining.
I think ulterior motives there, that some of this is vague enough to where somebody could step in and claim under one of these items that it's unfit. But it just seems so vague. It seems like if somebody had a desire to make it happen, they could find something in this wording to cause that to happen.
Like the public officer doing that? Because
The public officer, I think the public officer, based on the pressure from the 5 residents, could sit there and go, yeah, I agree with you. That is unhabitable because of one of those reasons.
Okay, our motion on the floor is
Kill it.
Kill the ordinance.
Make a recommendation for the law enforcement not to go forward with the ordinance.
Right, and that's what you seconded.
That's what I seconded.
Okay.
Yes.
Any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
It's unanimous.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Unmute, yes.
Sorry, thank you.
All right, let's move on to item number 10, is discussion regarding agricultural 2 zoning district. The Ag Board turned it down.
The Ag Board did meet last Monday, and they made the recommendation back not to proceed with the new Ag 2 district.
What was the reasoning?
They did not feel like it accomplished the goal of protecting family farms, and that it was an additional burden on agricultural families.
Did they give any specifics of what part of it? I mean, did they not like it being 5 acres? What, was there any parts of it they didn't like or parts of it they did like?
They thought that the current zoning ag district, unnumbered, just agriculture, where it is 1 per acre, was sufficient for what they were doing, and that there were other tools available if someone wanted to place their property in a conservation easement or whatever other tools were available to accomplish the goals of preserving family farms more. I mean, this is not my opinion.
Yeah, no,
Tell me
no,
what
it's-
they're-
Before we do anything with this, I would like to have a meeting with the Ag Board.
We can invite them to your next meeting
mean,
if you'd like to table this or postpone it until that time.
I just think that there's a lot of stuff in this, the reasoning behind some of this stuff, they didn't understand our reasoning going with 5 acre sections and only 1 dwelling on that 5 acres, where we're trying to preserve agricultural land and not have a house on every single acre. It slows down, or hopefully it would slow down development of our agricultural land, because they would have to come in and get a rezoning of it to like do a subdivision. Because as it stands, you've only got 1 house per 5 acres. A developer would have to come in and get rezoned, whatever, to put a house on every 2 foot of it. So I think we need to talk with the agricultural people,
Would you like to invite the entire ag board?
the entire board.
Okay.
I just feel the entire board rather than having one, that way we get get voices for, hopefully from every one of them. And we can go over this again, and, because I just feel that maybe we need to do away with the one we have and put that in its place, or ever how we need to do it, but there's something gotta be done to protect ag land, and putting a house on every acre is not a way to protect it, at least in my feelings.
If you'd like to, just make that as a motion and let everybody vote on it, I'll proceed with inviting the entire ag board to your next meeting for an open discussion between us.
Better to go to the Ag Board rather than have the Ag Board come here?
No, they'll come to our meeting, right?
I can invite, yeah, that's what I'm saying, with your motion in the direction of this body, I will invite that body to the next meeting.
All right, I would like to make a motion to invite or ask the Ag Board to attend and discuss this ordinance at our next meeting, which will be August the,
Let's say 7th.
Yes.
August the 7th,
Or the soonest meeting that they can make.
or the first meeting they could attend. Because I don't want to, we don't want to put a burden on them. If they can't make this meeting, maybe they can make the second meeting. Maybe the first meeting that all of the board, the whole board can attend, or at least
A majority.
a majority of the board can attend.
Point of information.
Go.
So did we not send back the ag officials to go to the board to gather this information, and this is what they brought forth?
This is what we made.
Right, but as I recall, there were 2 individuals came in here and spoke to us, and they were tasked with going back to the board, the ag board, discussing this, and bringing that discussion apparently to you. And this was the end results.
Where was this, well, I just want to answer this. Where was it discussed?
It was discussed at their last meeting, which was last Monday.
Here?
No, at their meeting. They meet every other month in this building and then go to each district. So they were in District 4 last time.
How many people were in attendance at that meeting?
All of the board, and then there was one from the public as well.
So there's only one person other than the board, so that it didn't get discussed out. It's like our meeting. We've got Mr. Markovich here. He right now is technically representing the whole entire county. They had one person representing all the farmers, so I think if we get in and we can talk to them, maybe we can come up with something better than this, but we need to come up with something.
But you're just inviting
The
the
board.
ag board
Well,
again.
no, we're inviting the whole board. We only had one person. We had when we sent this out, how many people here were from the ag board? Two people.
I think. I'd have to look at the video again, but I think Mr. Blanton.
Yeah,
and,
they were-
Ms. Alexander
yeah.
were both here.
All right, but that's my motion to invite them to a meeting and discuss this.
I'll second it because I'd like to talk about it. Okay, can we talk about that? So we have had public meetings, we've had public hearings, and I can't tell you how many times over the past 3 years, we've had people going, y'all have got to stop developers, y'all have got to stop developers. And I keep telling them, well, tell your farming neighbor to quit selling his land and there won't be a development next door. But short of doing that, because obviously nobody is stepping up to tell their neighbor, don't sell your land because you're going to sell it to a developer, short of that, we have been asked a jillion times by the farming community to do something about development. If the farming community is coming back and telling us not to, then we need to let it be clear that they are telling us not to stop development in this county. Because that's what they're saying by doing this. Because the way to slow development is not about putting your land in a conservancy, although that would do it, but that truly prohibits that farmer from ever doing, or the great-grandchildren from ever doing anything with that land. Whereas setting up a zoning that is a self-zoning element accomplishes several things. One, it becomes a public awareness and a public notice that there's a farm there, which realtors have to then disclose if they have a buyer who doesn't want to live near a farm. They can easily go to that website and they're responsible for looking at that zoning. They're not responsible for looking for conservancies, but they are responsible for looking for zoning. So it protects the farmer. It protects the family from being able to, down the road, the grandchildren coming back and saying, hey, my great-grandparents zoned this way, but we would like to sell because its best use is now a hospital, or whatever it might be. It allows that family generations down the way to lobby for a change based on the best use down the road that we can't even think of 50 years from now. So there are benefits to doing something, but I sure don't want to do it if the ag community doesn't want to do it. But if the ag community doesn't want to do it, I sure don't want to hear them complaining anymore.
Well, I do see one problem with it. And anytime you restrict something, it only benefits those who are within those restrictions at that given time. And we're limited to 5 acres per dwelling. And as you notice, generational farming has gone to the wayside, especially here in Oconee County. You've got more people moving in, wanting to move into a farm. But once again, looking after the common man, the individuals, because farming, most farmers make less than $40,000 a year. You're going to have to join up with somebody in order to start a farm off if you move into an area. And with you limiting one dwelling per 5 acres, there's no way you can have a laborman living on that property and be able to afford enough property just starting out to start up a small vegetable farm, something like that. Because the way this is written, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've got 10 acres tied up in
But what they're saying,
Residential.
they're not even talking about the 1 acre per 5 acres or 10 acres or 20 acres. They're saying they don't want an ordinance. And so I'm just saying,
Well, we already got an ag ordinance.
It's
but
one
we
house.
really don't, because it's really the same as the residential ordinance, and it's really the same as the rural residential ordinance. Actually, the rural residential ordinance is more restrictive. This was just a discussion of acreage.
Yeah.
So, the person has a choice of going ag 1 or ag 2. Ag 1 is 1 dwelling per 1 acre. They've got that choice. All we're
Right.
giving them is another choice, a more restrictive choice, if they choose to implement it for themselves. And that was,
And by
like
them,
Mike said, our effort to
right.
allow them to protect themselves from development.
But the downside
road.
of that is it has the ability, if, let's say.
It would
large
affect the
majority
next
of the
generation, but not the generation that picked it, unless they,
By
Unless-
not doing something prevents people from utilizing their rights of their property. By doing this allows them to best utilize the rights of their property the way they see fit.
And it's not permanent. It can be, if I inherit 500 acres and it's on this zoning, I can come back and say, no, I don't want this, I want it on the other, or I want it this or that, and I can petition to have it changed.
If I do a conservancy, I can never change it.
Right. If you-
Exactly.
Conservancy and all this other stuff, that's not even your land anymore, for the most part.
We're just giving people an option to say, I want protection, but there's not a mechanism out there other than a conservancy.
And
And again, if that's all they want, then we need to stop talking about it. And I'm fine with stop talking about
Let's
it.
see
Tell them
here.
to quit selling their land, if they've got acreages.
what you were talking about with the other, like they wanted to do a smaller thing, they could have ag 1, and they could have a house on every acre. Or, if they had 10 acres, they could have 4 houses and farm the rest of it, because they could have it on every acre. With this, they could only have 1 house on every 5 acres. It'd just be a bigger farm. So, this is,
Now, there's a minimum, just for information, there's a minimum of 7 acres to have a farm, correct?
I'm not
James?
aware of that.
I'm not
Is that
aware of
the-
that.
that's for tax purposes.
That's for tax purposes.
Oh, tax.
Just for tax
purposes.
purposes, not this.
So you can claim any acreage for a farm?
You can,
If you're looking at the agricultural exemption, then it's the 5 acre threshold and a portion of that's residence. And most land can fall into that, even if you're just,
So really,
Farming
4
trees,
acres is a
but-
farm?
1 acre is a farm, depending on what you're farming, but to get the tax exempt, you have to have
But
a
yeah,
certain
one's
amount.
tax
Yeah.
exemption, one's an acreage protection.
right, yeah. I think we're just talking 2 different things.
You're right, so just so I'm clear, I'm in muddy water right now. What amount of acreage is considered a farm according to Oconee County ordinances?
We don't have, okay, so we don't really
Don't have
have an
anything.
ordinance that says, hey, this is a farm. There's the state tax exemption that says, all right, this qualifies for the agricultural assessment ratio, which is consistent with the residential tax rate. But we don't have something that says, all right, this is a farm. We just have the agricultural designation as a zoning district, and it's, 1 residence per acre at this point in time.
But so it's just 1 residence per acre? There's no other classification other than that?
For ag 1, it has to be at least an acre.
An acre?
That's it, yeah.
Wow.
This just gives
For ag
them,
2, it'll be 5 acres.
this just gives them another alternative or another avenue to go. But it's still something we need to talk with them a little more about. And
It's just so strange that we have so many people that say, help us, help us, help
Yeah.
us. And then for the board to say, don't help us, is odd.
and
What-
that's all another reason to
I
talk
don't
to them.
wanna misconstrue their request. I think what they were saying is that there are potentially better tools that maybe we can all explore together as opposed to this. I'm not.
But then come to us,
Yeah.
that's the purpose of the meeting.
And they plan on coming quarterly. At y'all's
We would
request.
love their guidance as to
September.
what they want to do.
Coming anyway in September. They're coming anyway in September?
I'd have to look back at the calendar. I'm not prepared to answer that right now.
I think it'd be
but
quarterly,
I think
right?
that sounds right. It's either gonna be September or October.
And I sure don't want to create an ordinance that somebody doesn't want it. I don't want us to create something just to create it.
It is September, thank you.
So come
Y'all wanna
anyway.
wait till September? We can just kill this altogether and wait till September and let them decide what we are to
Don't
do?
kill it,
Or
just-
do you wanna talk to them about this?
You've got a motion on the floor right now to invite them to your next meeting, as a full group, or at least as a quorum,
Majority,
as a quorum, to come. And
discuss this a little further.
so if you wanna at least proceed with the vote for that, we'll let that determine your next step.
Why don't we amend it to where they're coming in the September meeting and just extend the invitation to go over this when they come to the next meeting they're attending.
Would you like to make a motion to amend the motion on the floor?
Correct.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
We have
Yes,
an amended motion.
Need a second?
Yes.
Second.
All right, now we're gonna vote on the.
I want to discuss real quick just that. He's got the second, if I may. I just want to say that the original motion said that we're at the next meeting or the next meeting that they are willing and able to come to. Maybe that next meeting is September, but I'd like to let them make that call.
We only said September because they said they're coming quarterly anyway.
Again,
That's
they,
what the
let them be the
chairperson-
judge. If they want to wait until September, let them wait until September, but I don't want to mandate them to September. If we can get this, get it handled. I just would love to hear
You want to
which way
withdraw
we
your
can go
amendment
with
then?
this.
I withdraw my amendment. Somebody could rewrite that amendment.
Put
All
August
right,
or
our
September.
motion on the floor is to have them to come to our next meeting or the
Whenever
first
they
meeting
get
they
formed
can
together.
get to,
If they want to get to.
if they want to, and we can discuss this further. Also to put this, on, where you put this on
Postpone
hold?
it. Yeah.
Postpone it.
Postpone it, that's it, just trying to come up with, to postpone any vote or anything on this particular item until we talk to them. Still second.
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
There we go. 7
Okay.
I could just catch you before you adjourn. Just when I pass, so I can pass along something to the law enforcement committee, tell me if this is wrong, I'm just gonna say, y'all want the ordinance, to go no further, essentially, due to disproportionate impact on the poor and lack of concrete discernible standards for the public officer and existing remedies, property maintenance code would suffice. Does that capture it?
Pretty much it, guys?
Thanks.
That's it.
That's all.
All right, do I hear a motion?
Motion.
All those in favor?